The reason you feel so overwhelmed by that long to-do list, it isn't that you lack time, it's that you're solving the wrong problems. We're about to show you the scientific system to find the single constraint that, when you remove it, fixes everything else.
Just let that sink in for a second. You know that feeling, right? That hamster wheel, where you're just running and running, always busy, but never really moving forward? Well, what if I told you that's not a personal failing? It's a strategic one. It's because you're fighting the symptoms, not the actual disease.
And in this explainer, we are going to hand you the keys, the exact framework to diagnose the real root cause of your overwhelm. Look, this isn't about working harder or trying to find more hours in the day. It's about applying a precise, almost surgical focus to the one single point of failure that's holding your entire system hostage. You ready to find it? Let's dive in.
So here's our roadmap. First, we'll unpack the overwhelm paradox and introduce you to the real enemy, inertia. Then we get into the good stuff, the three-phase framework. After that, we'll look at the neuroscience that makes this whole thing tick, give you a three-step protocol you can literally use tomorrow, and then wrap it all up with the one rule that changes the entire game.
Okay, first things first, we've got to bust a major myth. We've all been trained to think that being busy equals being productive, right? We wear those packed calendars and endless to-do lists like a badge of honor. But here's the paradox. What if all that frantic busyness is the very thing that's killing our efficiency?
The answer lies in a total shift in thinking. It's called bottleneck identification. And the core idea is simple, but it is so powerful. The speed of any system, your career, your business, a project, is only ever determined by its single slowest part. So your job isn't to make everything faster. Your job is to find and fix that one single constraint. Because real efficiency isn't about maximizing output everywhere. It's about maximizing flow through the one critical choke point.
So, if being busy isn't the goal, what's the actual enemy we're fighting here? Well, the real enemy isn't a lack of time or a lack of effort. It's this invisible force called systemic inertia. It's that feeling, where you're pushing and pushing, but the needle just refuses to move.
This slide, this right here is the whole game. On the left, you've got symptom solving. This is probably where you're living right now. Your effort is scattered, you're putting out little fires everywhere. And the result? Super low leverage and that feeling of inertia. But now look at the right. Constraint solving. This is about focused, laser-like effort aimed at the one thing that actually matters. This creates incredible leverage, and the result is systemic flow. Everything just starts moving smoothly and quickly.
And the cost of living on that left side is just staggering. In a lot of systems, a whopping 90% of all productivity problems come from this diluted focus. I mean, think about that. All that energy, all that effort completely wasted on tasks that aren't critical, while the real bottleneck is just sitting there, totally ignored. It's not that you're working at 10% capacity, it's that you're applying 100% of your effort to the wrong 90% of the problems.
So, how do we escape this trap? We need a system. Not just a good intention, but a repeatable, structured process that forces us to find the real issue. And that is the three-phase framework for high-leverage focus.
It's built on three simple pillars. First, we're going to do something called a process audit to see what's actually going on. Second, we'll use a special test for constraint identification to find that single bottleneck. And finally, we'll use exploitation and subordination to fix it for good. Let's break each one down.
Phase 1 is all about diagnosis. You can't fix what you can't see, right? The process audit means you get aggressive and you map out every single step of a process you want to improve. But you don't just map the steps, you create what's called a friction map. For every step, you're going to note its cost, not just in time, but in energy, in frustration. Where are the delays? Where do you just lose the will to live? That's your friction map. Okay, once you have that map, you move to phase 2, finding the constraint. And you do this with a tool that is just brilliantly simple, the If I Fix test. You look at every single point of friction on your map, and you ask yourself one question. If I fix this one thing, and only this one thing, will it actually speed up the final result of the entire system? For most of them, the answer is going to be no. But for one of them, the answer is going to be a loud, resounding yes. And that, my friends, is your constraint.
And that brings us to phase 3, where the real magic happens. Once you've found your constraint, you have two jobs. First, you exploit it. That means you do everything you can to maximize the flow through that one bottleneck. You give it your best energy, your best time, you protect it like a fortress. Your second job is subordination. This means every other step in the system gets a new job title. Their only job is to serve the bottleneck. You redesign everything to make sure that constraint is never waiting, never starved. The whole system now works for its most important part.
So the framework itself is incredibly powerful from a pure systems perspective, but what's really cool is how it aligns perfectly with how our brains are wired. Let's dig into the neuroscience of why this system actually feels so good to use.
So why is it that just identifying one single constraint suddenly makes it so much easier to concentrate and get things done? Why does it feel like you've unlocked some new level of focus? Well, it comes down to 3 key psychological and neurological tricks that this framework just beautifully hijacks for our benefit.
First off, it completely solves what psychologists call decision paralysis. Think of your prefrontal cortex, your PFC, as the CEO of your brain. It's responsible for all the big decisions and complex planning. But like any CEO, it's got a limited budget of energy for the day. And when you give it a to-do list with 100 items of seemingly equal importance, it just gets fried. It burns through all its energy just trying to decide what to do next. By identifying the single constraint, you give your brain's CEO one clear, undeniable mission. The decision is made, and all that precious mental energy can be channeled into actually doing the work.
Second, it taps into something called behavioral momentum. See, when you focus all your energy on the real bottleneck, you don't just get a small win, you get a huge, high-leverage win. You see a real, tangible improvement in the whole system. And your brain absolutely loves that. Seeing that kind of meaningful progress triggers a release of dopamine, the neurochemical for motivation. That good feeling makes you want to do it again. You're not just getting stuff done, you're building this powerful, self-reinforcing cycle of motivation.
And finally, it just obliterates what I call attentional drift. Our tendency to get distracted by shiny new things or easier, less important tasks. The single constraint becomes your mandatory North Star. It gives you absolute clarity. There's no more temptation to multitask because you know with total certainty that any effort you spend on something that isn't the bottleneck is completely wasted. It forces you, by its very design, into that deep, focused state of work we're all chasing.
All right, enough theory. Let's make this real. Right now, here is a simple 3-step protocol you can use tomorrow to find and fix the biggest blocker in any frustrating system in your life.
It all starts with that process audit. So grab a notebook or open a new document and just make a simple table like this one. In the first column, list every single step of the process, from beginning to end. Be brutally honest. In the second column, estimate how long each step takes. And in the third, and this is the critical one, rate the energy or friction cost on a scale from 1 to 10. A 10 is something you absolutely dread, a task that just drains you thinking about it. That is how you build your friction map.
So here it is, your protocol. 3 simple, non-negotiable steps. First, map the whole end-to-end failure using that template. Get it all out of your head and onto paper. Second, isolate the constraint. Use the if-I-fix test and be relentless until you find it. And third, subordinate and exploit. Make one high-leverage fix that targets only the bottleneck, and then realign everything else in the system to support that fix. That's it. It's simple, but it's not easy.
Once you start using this framework, once you feel the flow that it unlocks, you start to internalize the single most important lesson in all of this. It's a rule that will totally change how you look at work, projects, and goals forever. And it's this: if you have more than one priority, you have none. Just let that one hang in the air for a moment. Real progress, those quantum leaps in performance, they don't come from juggling a dozen things at once. They come from a ruthless, disciplined, singular focus on the one thing that truly matters right now, the constraint. Everything else is just a distraction.
So let's wrap this up. What we've learned is that bottleneck identification solves that core problem of scattered effort and systemic inertia. And why that matters is because it gives you a system to gain maximum leverage and just accelerate the flow of your entire system. The method is simple: process audits and exploitation. And the science behind it works because it resolves decision paralysis and creates that powerful behavioral momentum. The big takeaway here is this: productivity isn't about doing more, it's about mastering systems that make focus effortless. So here's my challenge to you. Tomorrow, map out your most frustrating system, find the constraint, and go unlock its maximum flow.